Meadows Public Utility District on Saturday, June 13th. The time is 8 a.m. I call the meeting to order. Michael, do you have some announcements?
I do. This is a regular session of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility Board. The meeting is being fed live with the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to www.kmpud.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or ask a question, please email msharp@kmpud.com and the board will respond. Director Indy is participating via teleconference. Due to this, all voting must be done by roll call. If the public would like to make ask a question or make a comment, please identify yourselves when making these comments. And with that, I turn it back over to the board.
Great. Peter, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Rickard?
Here.
Andy?
Here.
O'Grady?
Here.
Dornberg here, and Epstein.
Here.
Okay. 05.
Item 4 is oral communication / public input. It's the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Are there any oral communications? Nancy.
I would just like to say thank you for having that budget study yesterday and devoting the time to do that. So I just appreciate that.
Thank you for the comment. I think it was a useful session. And maybe we ought to do it on a regular basis. Any other oral communication? Hearing none, we'll move on to 5, corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. I think you have some, Michael, don't you?
Yes, sir. Staff would like to pull items 3, bad debt, from the consent agenda, and items C, I1, Q&D retention, and items C, III, Highway 88 repairs from the regular agenda.
They're just not ready, right?
Right. Or we have questions about the issues and need to come back.
Any other corrections to the agenda or consent calendar from board members? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar and the agenda as amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I guess we need to do it roll call, so...
Yeah, Rickard made the motion.
Dornberg seconded.
Rickard, aye.
Andy?
Andy, aye. Andy, aye.
O'Grady, aye.
Dornberg, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Passes. So moving on to 8A, discussion and possible action regarding the district's financials, efforts to reduce expenses and financial impacts on the continuing drought on the district's finances. Assistant Manager Jill Campbell, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We will start with April financials, and we'll start with the balance sheet on page 5 of the packet. Operating revenues for April are at $3,044,000. It's $262,000 down from plan. That's due to revenues being down for the year. A couple other notes on the balance sheet. Accounts payable shows a budgeted amount of just under $2 million, but our actual balance is only $742,000, so it's down $1.2 million from plan. This is just a timing issue, and the budget shows that there is 1.9 budgeted for construction in progress, which hasn't happened. We do have a final PG&E payment, but we don't have the final bill, so that's not booked currently. Another variance under liabilities, if you look at total other current liabilities, our actual balance as of April is $887,000 when budget is only $32,000. The largest variance in this is there's $475,000 sitting in a liability for the Mellow Roofs Trust that wasn't budgeted for, and then our Mellow Roofs account, we have a bank account and we have a liability for it. So that's just a timing issue. Right now, we have 200,000 in that liability that just hasn't been paid back to Union Bank yet. That's all I have on balance sheet, unless there's any questions. We'll go ahead and move on to April combined income statement. Our April revenues are down $205,000 from plan, while our year-to-date revenues are down $954,000 from plan. As we went over yesterday, our year-to-date revenues are down 12% from plan. We have a year-to-date net loss of $127,000, which is showing $219,000 better than plan. We've discussed previously that depreciation is lower than plan. We haven't finished the project. Also, interest expense is down. So I did do a summary April income statement on the board showing what we would look like if depreciation, if the budget was at what we've actually depreciated, same with interest expense. And I also changed operating revenues a little bit. I tried to do what we talked about with cost of goods sold.
Thank you.
So this is something, if this works, that we can at least manually start doing on our financial statements. So actually, our year-to-date operating revenues are down $654,000 from plan. Our cost of goods sold is actually right about on plan. We have been able to save $211,000 in operating expenses year-to-date. And we're showing our net income loss still at $127,000. If those two items weren't considered, we'd actually be down about $443,000 from plan. And at the bottom line, I just wanted to show what we've done in property tax allocations through April. In April, we did allocate $150,000 in property tax revenues to the electric department to meet the tier ratio. Year to date, we have allocated $280,000. And what we've accrued so far is $708,000. So we have about $429,000 sitting there yet to be allocated through April.
Joe, I just want to say, I think this format is great as a general, and I would offer two suggestions on it. One is that we don't really need to see it to 6 digits accuracy. So if you felt like rounding to the nearest thousand, that would be fine. Because you do it when you're talking anyway. And then the other is on variance. It would be helpful if negative meant variance that was bad and positive meant variance that was good. So like expenses being below plan. Otherwise, you have to figure out whether positive or negative is good or bad in each thing. So that might be another suggestion. But I think this is a great direction. And you can clearly see that there's property tax available to cover the net loss. If we don't need it for tier, so we don't have to dip into reserves, and you can just see that on one sheet. So this is great.
My one request, Jill, would be to add gross margin, so subtract cost of goods sold from
I got it.
and depreciation is not an operating expense, is that correct?
Correct, I have that separated as a line item.
Thank you. So that's 8A I. Any questions, comments from the audience? Board members? Why don't you go on to 8A double I?
In the packet on page 20 is a preliminary May income statement. We did come close in May to meeting our operating revenues. We are down $11,000 from plan in May. Electric and propane did hit their sales for May. Water and wastewater were down just a little bit. Even though electric did meet its plan for revenues in May. It was budgeted at a net loss. So preliminary, what we're looking at is actually allocating another $225,000 in property taxes to electric in May. And that's all I have on May, unless there's any questions.
Why don't you keep rolling through 8A and 3, and we can ask any questions after you're done.
In the packet are a few 5-year cash waterfalls. This was discussed yesterday. The first 2 pages is a combined 5-year cash waterfall showing what our cash would look like if we do mature the 3 short-term RUS loans that are budgeted in this 5-year plan. And we are showing that there is a cash low under this scenario of about $1.4 million in December of 2018. At the bottom of this is also a reserve fund, which is currently sitting at $3.2 million. And in the budget, we are assuming that any out-valley expense over what we got for RUS funds is being taken out of reserves, as well as $2.7 million in switch station expenses. Under this first scenario, there is not enough money in the reserve funds to cover all of that expense. And in December 2018, this scenario is showing a negative reserve fund of $1.2 million. So if we were to fund that out of operating cash, we would drain operating cash in December 18. So we did a second scenario, starting on page 23, of what our cash would look like if we rolled over all 3 of those RUS loans. For purposes of presentation, we used rolling those over to a 35-year term with 4%. And it is showing under this scenario that we would be able to cover that $1.2 million in switch station costs, and our cash low would be about $1.9 million, and that's actually in September of 15. There is a correction that needs to be made in this second scenario. Bank of the West loan is showing $7,100 each quarter, and that's actually the cost per month. So this rollover needs to be fixed to show the corrected amount for that. So the first scenario actually has that corrected, showing that our cash low under the second scenario would be September 15 at $1,877,391. And then finally, there are 5-year cash waterfalls by department, just to show which departments actually are making money and losing money. This is shown under the first scenario, what would happen if we did mature the 3-year loans.
Jill, can you remind me what CAT interest is?
It's actually, it shouldn't be interest, it's our CAT loan for the snow removal.
Snow blower, the RPM 10.
Okay.
And that ends in next year.
So it's not interest, it's debt payment?
It's the full debt payment. I
Okay.
just didn't, it's a smaller number, so I didn't break out interest and principal.
Yeah, of
on
course,
that.
that's fine, okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Isn't that a lease? Is that a lease? No, or it's a full loan? Full-on loan? Okay. What is it then that the district leases? I'm just thinking back to what I recall being in the audit.
Release. I don't recall either. There might be something out there. I just don't recall.
Okay.
But we purchased the cap.
Yeah.
The RPM tech will be ours next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Jill, 2 questions. One, there's a line item, budget June 2015 draft on the cash flow. What is that?
Oh, that's just, that should probably be updated too. That's the cash balances from the balance sheet on the budget. And I think this one is showing, there's a variance between our cash waterfall and our budget because we accrue property taxes, and
In the
for,
budget.
in the budget. If with revenues, we book revenues as soon as we bill instead of cash actually received. So there is a variance between the two.
I think there's something in addition to the Bank of the West loan going on, because the September 15 cash balance in the rollover is 1924, and then the other one is 1877, so that's more than the 14K difference of 2 months of Bank of the West loan. Do you understand what I'm driving at?
I do. I'll have to take a look at it.
Any other questions or comments from the board or the audience? Michael, you had something to say?
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a moment, as we have at the beginning of each of our meetings, to talk about operating expenses. And I think it's important that we continue to, look at recommendations. As the board knows, we've made steps to reduce our operating expenses, our controllable expenses, by reducing our staffing levels by 3 full-time positions, and we can see those savings in Jill's work. It's an annual savings of approximately $175,000 when you consider benefits. Staff training and versatility, I think by cross-training, the things that we've done in the fire department recently, and then the things that we do with snow removal, has helped the need to reduce temporary staff and use our existing staff in a more well-rounded and meet the needs of the district. Retirement health cost, the board has taken actions to do a cafeteria plan to limit our liability as far as annuities for retirees for health care costs. We've reviewed our future capital projects and really taken a close eye, eliminating all projects for 2016 and reducing the expenses for the 2000 to the balance of the term of the budget by over $1.2 million. So we're really taking a look at capital expenses and not looking at them as a wish list, but more of a have-to situation. Once again, the switch station is budgeted at a 4-year project. We'll get into that more. And we're reviewing switch station preliminary budget for different options to reduce costs, such as reusing parts at KM Green down at the salt station, at the switch station, if we actually need to complete that. We've also not only reduced but eliminated the use of consultant for operation and project for certain areas, and reduction in material and supply purchases to a strict purchase order basis and a need to. No increase has been budgeted for staff for the next fiscal year, and we're continuing to look at ways that we can improve efficiency through performance reporting, which Brandy will be addressing shortly. And of course, we're delaying certain projects such as Caples Lake water rights, trying to take a slower path on these things to reduce costs as we go along. So I guess the last thing is we welcome any suggestions if the public or the board sees areas that might be ways that we can conserve and get through this drought period. We are welcome for suggestions.
Thanks for doing that, including quantifying it. Questions, comments?
Are you planning, Judy Flynn, are you planning on cutting any more staff?
Not at this point. We're planning on not hiring until we actually absolutely need to for snow removal. So, when it snows, then we'd like to staff up, but we're going to wait until to see when it snows. So,
In your current snow removal staff, how many of them stay on year-round?
all. Everyone that we have now is year-round staff. And we have how many people trained in our staff at snow removal, including yourself?
6?
More than that.
The current staff?
Yeah.
And going one step farther, what types of jobs are they doing right now?
Oh, that's a very good question. So our staff, we're aggressively pursuing defensible space. We do chipping programs not only just once a year, but we do it, pretty continuously. We had a major project over by Juniper Ridge where we did a transformer. I'm going to be showing and reporting on that. Rick, maybe you can go through some of the other dead-end flushing, what other items that staff is working on.
Defensible space chipping for homeowners, of course. Sewer manhole inspections throughout the valley. The CQC propane field inspections as well as transformer inspections for the electrical side. So there's quite a few different activities that we have ongoing for maintenance that we do every summer. And then, of course, we'll be bringing the playground back down in September in the
Right.
city.
So it just depends on the department. So such as the wastewater, right now Derek has just completed the biannual cleaning of the membranes. It takes a lot of staff time. But maintaining our existing facilities is a major effort right now. And we're going to get into another major project of maintaining the out valley line, and I'll address that more specifically as my report goes along. So we'd be happy to, show you or publicize our action list and the things that we do each week, because we monitor that on a regular basis.
I also believe, Michael, that wasn't it in the operations committee where there's a whole list of all the summer activities?
Yeah, it's an extensive list.
It's an extensive list. I mean, but this happens every year. There's nothing new about it. Although we do have the added erosion fixes and so on in the out valley, which is going to be a major effort.
Yes, sir.
Anything else on 8A? So you're not looking for action here. This is an update. Thank you, Jill. That's great. I don't think you get off the hook yet. We had a budget planning session yesterday. Given that I think everybody was here for that, do you want to just kind of summarize it? Or do you want to go through it?
Either way, I'm prepared to go through the key assumptions and all that, but
I wouldn't. I mean, I think we have exactly the same
Unless Bob
audience.
Endy has, since he was next.
Right. Bob Endy, would you like to go through it, or?
I don't want to drag people through a level of detail that was covered yesterday. I can do that separately with Michael.
yeah, I'd be pleased to meet with you and discuss that and go over planning issues as well, Bob.
Yep.
So would you like to summarize where we came out yesterday?
Yeah,
From
so
your
we had a
perspective?
good budget session yesterday. I think we presented a budget that has been fully vetted by the Finance Committee and the board after 5 or 6 months of, I think one of the key factors is that the primary factor that affecting the 5-year budget is the ongoing drought, and that we have modeled our budget revenues and sales based on that, and that we not only did an overview of the district financials, but also compared how we did last year with a 12% decrease in revenues and how that compared to the budget for 2016 through 20. And then an interesting side is that we actually presented the effects of if we had increased sales of 5% and 12%, what those would do to the bottom line. I don't actually have that slide sitting here, but anyway, so I think it was an interesting exercise and answered a lot of questions, and I think at the end of it, the board was, I would say, somewhat satisfied with the presentation.
Yeah, I would be prepared to pass the budget today if everybody wants to. I just request that the corrections we discussed be made, this reflecting 2015 net income and also an updated cash waterfall.
So district staff has reviewed the budget and recommends approval of the 5-year operating budget for fiscal years ending 2016 through 2020.
Nancy?
So let's say we have a banner year as far as snow, and you've got the rates set at what they are. How long does the board envision that it'll allow the rates to stay the way they are versus turning around and adjusting?
I don't know that we have an answer to that. But I think we discussed yesterday a rate rationalization or consistency effort for next year. If we had a banner year, I'd like to see just one board member, material reduction electricity rates.
I think that's the main opportunity, is to go back to reducing electricity rates like we wanted to. If there's a strong thing to adjust, and that's about a 90-day process or so to do that. We can also look at other ways of doing it by doing a refund or something. But that would be the main opportunity that I would see. I mean, the propane rate is already pretty much at cost. The only opportunity, if there's a lot more sales, is the operating costs are distributed over a larger group. The electricity is kind of the big one.
And I think it partly depends on whether a banner year, whether there's a fairly quick indication from Vail, for example, or from real estate sales, that the banner year is stimulating something, activity that will make that higher electricity consumption more permanent rather than just temporary. But as fast as possible, Nancy, I can guarantee you that. I do have just one little statistic, just because I was curious about it. I went back to the first budget I ever saw as a board member, which is 2009, 2010. And this is sort of in relation to Judy's question about staff and so on. And now obviously this was before electricity and propane, but our staffing costs were 42.3% of our budget. That's salaries, wages, payroll, taxes, benefits. This budget is 19.3%, which, it's hard to say what's good or what's bad because I don't really know what to compare it to. But what I know is clearly we've not, and staff has not said, oh, look at all these new revenues, let's staff up and staff up and staff up and then have a lot of redundant staff. That I'm certain of.
So with that, I'll make a motion, we approve this budget as amended.
I'll second that motion. Rickert seconds that motion.
So all in favor, Rickert?
Rickert, aye.
Andy?
NDI.
O'Grady, aye.
Thornburg, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Great. So you have an approved budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With those
With changes.
amendments.
I got it.
Yeah.
And
This
you
is-
start on next year's pretty soon?
How's that audit coming? Let's get on.
I don't know the last time a budget was finalized before the year started.
Good goal.
But not in my memory. So that's good.
So moving on to 8C, discussion and possible action regarding final measures and ongoing maintenance associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. So we're just going to do 2, fiber line update and ongoing maintenance. I think you've got a presentation on ongoing maintenance. Judy.
Excuse me, Standish, could I just make one comment now that the budget is passed?
You don't like it? Budget?
No, I'm not making a comment, yes or no.
Okay.
I'm speaking as a homeowner now, who has been looking forward to a rate decrease for many years now. And some of them may actually read parts of the budget, some won't, but they'll notice that they're not getting a rate decrease. I think it might be politically correct to put out a little one paragraph something saying, we adopted the budget, we're in tough times due to the drought, we're really sorry there isn't going to be a rate increase, or decrease. We'll probably get an increase. I'm teasing you. But put a little something out to everyone in the valley when you put the bills out or whatever that gives them some hope for the future and gives them some confidence that you're doing the best you can. Because there's a lot of mumbling and grumbling, and we would like to kind of smooth that over. Give the general public who is not paying real close attention, but they're paying the bills, something, just a little snippet of information that's a little more positive.
Okay. I mean, along those lines, Judy, I'm just wondering, because I don't want to make this sound, I think it's a good idea, and I don't want to make it sound defensive in any way, but because it is just what it is. But this question has come up before, and I've looked at my own situation, for example, which I don't know if that's average or not. But again, going back to when I was first on the board and when Mountain Utilities owned the utilities, the certain utilities, you know, propane has come down a lot. Snow removal, because of the way we structure the contracts, has come down a lot because of the low snow years. So two major costs have come down a lot for homeowners. Electricity has gone up a lot for reasons that we, I think, all understand. So it's not all, you know, increase. That's comments I've gotten is, you know, PUD never decreases anything, it always increases things. It's not true. And for many homeowners, not others, unfortunately, for people who use all electricity, it's a different story. But for me, I mean, I think I'm probably fairly average in how we use utilities. My total energy bill, if I apply today's rates to my consumption in Mountain Utilities last year, my utility bill has not gone up at all, my energy bill, for propane and electricity combined. The electricity increases have been completely offset by the propane decreases. So for some people who use more electricity or don't use propane at all, it's a completely different story, unfortunately. But I also know people who use far more propane and use up very little electricity, and so theirs is a different story. So I don't know if that's worth noting in any way, or just simply saying what you've suggested, because I think it's probably the better thing to do. But I do want to say that it has not all been increases. In two major areas, it's been decreases. I mean, in East Meadows, before the PUD took over, we were paying $1,000 a driveway, not $750 a driveway. We were paying $160,000 rather than whatever it is now, $135,000 as an association for snow removal. I mean, our dues went down by 10 or 15% just because of the snow removal.
Well, I think some assessment would be helpful, and also your clock now has the right time on it, which has some value.
Nancy, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and so dovetailing on what Judy just said, and I hear what you said, you know, so I'll just use us as an example. 9 years ago, we were up here full time, my husband and I, you know, used everything there was, every service, and at that time it was Mountain Utilities. You know, and I put a circle around the whole utility bill, and I'd look at it in the dead of winter, for everything, we were paying $500. Now, in summer, one person occupying our place, the lowest our rates have gotten down to, or our bill, our collective bill, we're talking around $430. So for us, and I have to I would assume that there's other people like us that are going, wow, you know, that's how come the rates, it feels like the rates have gone up and there isn't that relief. So whatever you can do to communicate it in a simple fashion would be great, but, you know, that's just an example.
Well, if you're making the comments, there's obviously the need to communicate it in a more proactive way.
It's totally dependent on propane usage.
Yeah, and I
Because that's where the savings has been. Everything else has cost more.
Yeah,
And snow removal and propane are the other counterexamples. And everything else costs more than it did.
Yeah, propane is what we probably use the most of.
And so in my case, you know, the last winter was about 3/4 of the prior winter on a monthly basis, driven by propane savings. I guess the only, or one other thing I'd say is one, probably and hopefully, electric rate increases have stopped, meaning we're budgeting flat to down in hopefully a worst case scenario. And, you know, since the 1999 rate case before the CPUC, you know, we had electric rates that grew at 11% annually. So if we can hold it steady and decrease from here, then probably the increases are over.
I have two comments from the viewing public. One is when people from the audience speak, if they could try to speak up as much as possible. These are the speakers for the teleconference people. So at one time you actually sat up there for a bit. So when you
It's
make
good
comments,
practice.
if we could move forward so we could be heard. The second comment is that Cheryl Stern mentioned that while Judy has a good point, it might be good to cover in the July 4th meetings, as it is not it's not a simple matter. So that's from our audience.
It's a good comment. Any other comments? You're not through your quota if you...
We'll catch you
She's
later.
good.
Don't worry. Yeah, we may not be finished.
Hold on.
So I think we're on to 8C2, Michael.
Yeah, so the staff continues to work on closing out the Out Valley project, including finalizing the as-built, the underground as-built. The electronic copies have been received, and the paper versions are being shipped. Retention payments have been paid out for the overhead and the substation. Underground is still being worked out. Closeout permits, we should be very close to closing out our SWIP permit and our other permits. Prepare final contract paperwork and notices of completion. That would only be for the underground project. The other two were completed last meeting. So underground should come before the board at the next meeting. As far as operations and maintenance, we met with the United States Forest Service yesterday for our annual operations and maintenance meeting. Michelle came up and we had a pretty much a day-long meeting. With this being the first year of it, we had to figure out how this is going to work. We have one constraint that in normal years we would only be able to get out onto some of these roads now or even later because of the snowfall, and you have to maintain these roads. So it's a very short construction period, and we have to put out a work list, a work plan, and have that approved by the Forest Service before we go out and do any normal maintenance work on the line. This year we had some extraordinary rainfalls in December and February, which had a dramatic impact on the line. A lot of this underground work was actually completed in 2013 with no show of evidence of erosion, but due to these flash floods, or whatever you want to call them, we had some significant erosion this last year. So we're going to be putting together a work plan for the summer of 2015. It'll go before the Forest Service for review and approval. They'll have 30 days to do so. We'd like to get our work plan done by the end of this month, give them the month of July to review our materials, and then to do the work actually in August and September. Portions of the work plan installing is including to install water bars in front of the fiber and electrical vaults to hopefully eliminate the water that's going actually into the vaults to try to divert the water on the surface level. Erosion control for the access roads and grading. This is the major portion of our work on the Out Valley line will be road maintenance. Vegetation management, hazardous tree removal. We removed one on December 11th, I think the board would remember. PG&E actually went through the 115 and 34 overhead lines. It has done their hazardous tree removal already. So it's good to have them as an underbill because they've already completed that work. And we just reviewed it and everything looks real good to us at this point. Of course, we always have to look at that again after a big windstorm to see if any trees are leaners or have fallen down and need to be removed. Invasive weed monitoring, that happens later on in the year once the weeds actually have a time to get established. And then approve the path from 37 to KM Green. We have to walk these lines, and in our revegetation efforts, we just felled trees and left brush alone, and it's pretty hazardous. So we've asked and received preliminary approval to actually establish a little bit more of a path so it's more safe for people to actually walk the line and access the overhead on areas that aren't roads. So I mentioned about the road maintenance, and as you'll recall, we had some erosion on the first road that's over by Silver Lake. That's one of the district maintained roads, and it was pretty dramatic. It came down the side of it. And these pictures will probably be the worst of what we saw out there, but it's pretty dramatic over a long period of road. And we've repaired all that. We considered this an emergency repair, and we took a considerable amount of base and went out there and smoothed out the road and regraded it and installed about 4 or 5 water bars. During our inspection, Mickey Smith, who's our representative, pointed out areas that she would like to see additional work, and Michelle Gamble pointed out areas where we could install additional water bars. Some of the areas, such as this one, are very difficult because you could see that the ground swell, basically the drainage goes right into a telecommunications vault. So this is a difficult one, as we might have to actually raise the level of that vault to keep the water out of it. Of course, we'll be sealing it, so we'll localize the problem, but this is one of the areas where if that vault fills up and the cables aren't sealed, you can see how that problem mitigates down the line and causes problems throughout. We also looked at other areas of the line that are just on Forest Service roads, and we're also, of course, responsible for anything that erosion happened due to our construction. This is one area where the line was actually put into a road. You can see on either side, and we have erosion in the road. In this area, we'll grade this out and we'll actually use cinders to repair that area. You can see more erosion along this. This is another area where we had erosion going down the direct path of the trench line. Again, this is an area you'll remember at the Bear River intersection. If you look up, once you make that curve in, this is where we basically parked when we did our inspection of the line going underneath Highway 88. And we actually crossed the road to get over to a vault, and you could see that we had erosion coming down off to that road. So we'll be regrading up above that to allow that not to come across that road. This is a picture of the vault and a swale that we'll be putting in to try to keep, you can see how the water path now is directly to the vault, and we'll try to put a bar in front of that to get the water to go to the side of it. You'll all remember, if you've been out on the Out Valley line, the line shack, and this very steep road that goes from the line shack to KM Green. And this suffered tremendous erosion during these periods. You can see it a little bit more. There's a water bar there, and it's been broken through, and the line is going through. The water is going through, and this had a significant amount of water come through. And these water bars were about 2 or 3 feet deep before the erosion, and now they're 6 inches to a foot. So there's a lot of silt that I'm standing on in this picture. We're lucky enough to share this maintenance responsibility with PG&E, and we're going to actually approach PG&E about the abandonment of this road, because we don't drive on it. It is way too steep for a vehicle or any of the Kirk vehicle, and I don't think they drive on it. And a lot of our line doesn't have a road. It looks like this. The entire line from 37 up to the line shack has no roads on it, and the entire 115 line doesn't have a road on it. So I think trying to maintain a steep road that maybe a Jeep or an ATV could get, but in reality, we just don't drive on that road too much. In the steep sections, I don't know why we would try to maintain that. So since we do have dual responsibility, we'll be approaching PG&E about the future repairs on this. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions on operations and maintenance, and my next subject will be the fiber line.
Can you just quickly summarize what the district staff will do, will self-perform, and what will contract out?
Yes, so for this maintenance issue, for the erosion and controls, we'll do it all in-house. So we'll probably we've sent out PG or U.S. Forest Service the mixture of the road base that we would like to use to fill in this areas. Once they approve that mixture, we'll get about 100 ton of product drop shipped to different locations throughout the site, and then district staff will use district equipment, and we'll go out there and grade it out. And we have access to U.S. Forest Service quarry, where they have additional rock and cinders, which we can also provide to these areas. So all of this erosion control is anticipated to be in-house. As far as other operations and maintenance, we have contracted with RCI to do the noxious weed survey, because you have to be a biologist to do that. And we've contracted with Exponential to do the technical inspections, which Dave will be coming out in August to perform. So minimal cost as far as outside services. I like to do most of this in-house. Road base is pretty cheap except for the transportation costs.
Would you characterize this maintenance as about what you'd expect for this project, more than what you expected or less? And part of the reason I ask is I ran into Dave Waddle after we met yesterday and asked him about his view from inspecting it, and he basically said, hey, I thought it was pretty good. And he said you got some comments from the Forest Service saying, there are areas here where we can't really say you did it, meaning we just don't know. So the question is really about what you expected, significantly worse or significantly better?
Well, I think the flash floods that we received in December and February were surprising, and I think they did significant more damage than I expected. I think that the Forest Service likes working with the district, because I think we'll be good stewards of the areas that we have, and we'll come through and repair these areas. And they've had difficulty with other utilities coming back and resolving issues that they've had along this corridor as well.
So more snow, less flash floods.
Yes, sir.
So, Michael, Bob, here, a couple questions. First off, you talked about abandoning maintenance of a road up to the line shack. What does that imply as far as how you would access things along that corridor when you need to? Is that like everything's on foot carrying equipment, or what does that mean?
Yes, sir. It would be on foot carrying equipment, just like we would access other areas that have no roads at this point. And Bob, just to be frank, I don't think it's actually a road that we could use anyway. At a certain point, that gets so steep that I wouldn't allow district vehicles on it in the first place. We just don't have the type of vehicle that would access it unless we borrowed Marcy's Jeep. I don't think we could get there. So.
Understand. The second question I've got is, it may be too early to do this. You may be dealing with issues that are sort of like, repair deficiencies that were not apparent when the installation was done, as opposed to an ongoing rate of repairs. But I think it's important for us to start thinking in terms of a figure of merit that says what percent of assets are we spending in ongoing O&M, so that we have a way to monitor that, right? Because there was this discussion a couple of times about, well, is 1% or 3% or some other figure the right amount of ongoing expense to maintain an asset base. And I think it's important for us to be putting in place a measure that says we know what the percent of assets is that we are spending on ongoing O&M.
Yeah, Bob, I think that's an excellent point. I take that as an action item, and I look to Jill to possibly modify our timesheets so that we can really track our O&M labor costs and material costs on an ongoing basis. I think that's a great idea.
Any other questions, comments from the board or audience? Why don't you move on to 8C2 fiber line, please? Here we go.
As the district is aware, we've been on ongoing efforts to repair the fiber line that has been determined not to be sealed between the vaults. I think we talked about the bars that we're going to be putting in front of the vaults. District staff has met with Q&D, Titan, Edge, RCI, and EEC with regards to this project, and determined that Edge will do all of the fiber work. That there's a minimal amount of electrical work to be done besides that, the sectionalizing cabinets that can be done relatively easily. We have been identifying products to be used for this repair, and have approved the silicone that they're going to be using to seal it, and the caps that they're going to use to seal the spare conduit. We're still looking for a repair date from Q&D and Edge to come up, and after those repairs are made, we'll have Dave Rightly come up to not only do the inspection on the Out Valley line, but do the inspections on these. During the repairs, district staff will be there to make sure that things are done in accordance with the specification, and we are withholding retention funds for this project. So we're hoping to see this done early this summer. And just to remind the board, the project will entail purging out the conduits of all the water with air, getting them to a good state, and then sealing the conduits, capping the spare lines, and reestablishing the spare across the Silver Lake Bridge, because we've used the spare for our existing telecommunications, putting in repulls where we see necessary, and then mounting the splice boxes onto the side of the, so that's the extent of the project.
Great. So Michael, just one question. I mean, I think I'd rather have Brandy inspect than Dave Rightly.
Mm-hmm.
Just judging from what she found and he didn't, I'm just wondering how we reconcile, the amount of money we spend, what we expected, and the quality of what was delivered.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be on site. I think that's been discussed at previous staff meetings, that district staff has to be on site, and Brandy and her staff will be there to, look at the plans and look at what we receive. And then on an overall basis, Dave Rightly will be coming out on his nickel to ensure that everything is done according to plans. So
Okay.
that's the steps the staff is recommending at this point.
Any questions from the audience? Rolling right along to 8D. Continued discussion and possible action regarding the current Out Valley cost estimate. Overall project costs and potential risks, costs of ownership discussion, and Russ Powerhouse depreciation determination update.
As the board is aware, the district is working with PG&E on the final true-up of the costs associated with the Out Valley project. Their current estimate shows a $228,000 increase over previous estimates due to two factors. First is an increase in the substation testing and review in the amount of $110,536. This increase is due to the additional time and effort PG&E spent on testing and commissioning the telecom work while working through the T1 line issues, including PG&E telecom personnel standby time and additional support during the testing. The board will remember the period of time where we were working with AT&T and Exponential trying to get the T1 line finally active to allow PG&E to complete their testing. This happened before we could commission the project and turn it on in November. During this time, PG&E nearly pulled off the project due to the delays and put their people towards other projects. But the district was able to finally activate the T1 line in time to complete the project. Also contributing to this expense was the time spent identifying and retesting due to the failure of the KM current transformer. I think the board will remember that we installed and then had to remove and install a new current transformer at the site. And what happened with this is that it was replaced at the manufacturer's cost, but we lost a considerable amount of time and had to redo testing because of the failure of this current transformer. The second factor contributing to this increase was the cost of the initial system impact study and the facility study of $117,000. When Michelle started tracking the Out Valley cost forecast, she did not include any of the pre-2013 costs, so these costs were not reflected. That included our environmental costs, were never reflected on that. In reconciling the book, the district staff found that the overall total submitted by PG&E did not match due to these expenses. PG&E bills on a bulk basis, so it is difficult to tell what specific costs are included. What you receive is a total bill. They don't actually say what costs are being included into what. Total costs of the PG&E for the project are estimated to close at $5.7 million, with $789,000 in ITCC costs, for a total of $6.5 million, 17% of the total project cost. With this increase, the project stands at $38.7 million over the amount borrowed from us by $1.7 million. And this is all reflected in the budget that was just approved. This expense was included in that budget and is reflected in the board packet. And I open it up for questions.
Shocking.
Yeah, I have no idea what recourse we have, but this bulk billing and, I mean, there's no way for us to make a judgment as to whether it's reasonable or not. I don't know if there's a way to explore that with PG&E, but given their scope of work and services and compared to everything else that was done, it seems the percentage of the cost of the project is unreasonable. I mean, but I don't know, what recourse do we have? I mean, it just seems we should have some recourse to, suggest that they take a better look at what they've really spent and that they're properly charging us.
We have asked for a better breakdown of costs. I think you've seen the breakdowns that we get now that just say, basic general categories of engineering. They don't supply very good backup to their costs, and we've asked for a better backup to these increases.
One thing that would help me, depending on how difficult it is, but I mean, I think it'd be worthwhile, I would just like to know what the total engineering costs were, power engineers plus Exponential, for all the engineering, design, engineering, environmental, et cetera, work that they've done over the 5 years or whatever, and compare that to what PG&E is calling engineering costs. I would just like to make a comparison.
best I can tell you, Eric, I mean, we designed
Well,
a whole
it gives me a
system.
sense of reasonableness and some point of discussion.
Nancy, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, it's a question. So we're saying that it's turning out to be 17%. What did we think the percentage was going to be? What's the difference? I mean,
The original cost estimate, I think it's, when they had an overage in October, I think it's about $1.2 to $1.5 million over what we anticipated, is a fair statement right off the top of my head. We had an overage of, I believe it was $1.2 million about, that they came through, and we instituted meetings, I think that was almost a year and a half ago.
Right.
When they actually showed that overage. And I can pull back up those records from what they originally anticipated to what they are now.
yeah, I'm just curious the percentage,
Oh.
the apples to apples,
It's
because
in
I
this
follow
board
what you're
packet.
saying.
It's
here,
on the sheet.
but-
Then there was the savings because the tax ended up being 22% instead of 38 thanks to an act of Congress.
I mean,
But
my
I think
sense
your point is,
my sense is they were probably responsible for 5% or less of the system. But their engineering costs, their costs are far exceed that, that small percentage. That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
And I have no idea how they come up with it. I mean, I know there's an hourly charge, but does that mean that the engineers assigned to this project just automatically put down 40 hours a week, even though they've got 2-hour staff meetings and lunches and whatever else they may do over the course of a day? I mean, is it reasonable?
Yeah.
Do we have any recourse, or are we just, I don't want to use wrong language here, but, I mean, do we have any recourse? Any point of discussion, any way of having a reasonable discussion about it?
To answer that question, Nancy, the original estimate that we had on 4/29/13, so basically 2 years ago, was at 3.2 million, and the cost as of today is 5.0 million. So without the ITCC, which actually was a savings.
although when we started with them, they said plus or minus 50%, so they're right on target.
Plus or minus 1.5%, Bob? Is that-
50. They said plus or minus 50%. So,
Okay.
Anything else on project costs and potential risks? Cost of ownership discussion?
Just the final
Sure.
issue, that's not a bill that we're receiving, that is a forecast that we're sharing with the board. We'll come back when the actual bill and any reconciliation to the board for approval. So just to close out that subject, I'm not asking for anything right now, I was just giving you the best estimate.
and our main leverage is we have cash and they're going to submit a bill and we cannot pay it unless we're satisfied that it's an accurate accounting.
So this will come back.
Cost of ownership discussion?
Yeah, I'll go straight to rest depreciation and take cost of ownership with the next item, if that's all right. We are, district staff has taken the lead from Howard Barnes on the question of the RUS depreciation. We have, discussed with RUS staff that in October of 2014, we actually presented the rest depreciation study. In December 2014, they first had a meeting and asked for follow-up questions, which we answered within a week. Late in January, they had another meeting, asked more questions, and we answered those within a week. And we haven't heard anything since February 6th. So I feel it's very important that we get this issue resolved prior to the end of the fiscal year. We have made a breakthrough with Russ, contacted Atina Kuman, who's put us in contact with Jim Elliott, who is the administrator there, and he has promised us a determination by early next week. So I think we will see a result from this, and I'm glad that we have made direct contact with Russ and established those relationships. So they're just overwhelmed. I got a call Friday for them looking for a copy of our contract because they couldn't find their copy because they just had a lot going on.
Sure the Chinese have it.
Once again, the budget is based on a reduction from the 7% to a 3.5%. Our existing budget is based on 7%.
So assuming we get the determination next week, which seems likely, are we going to back out this current fiscal year or leave it?
That's 11/1.
That was November 1st.
So we would back it out. Okay.
We made it a point that we needed to do that before the end of our fiscal year. So
Right.
we could do that.
Any questions, comments on depreciation? Pretty non-controversial. So, is this cost of ownership time?
Just one more question. Does that have an impact on our tier ratio? It's beneficial.
Beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could back out property taxes
Right.
allocated if we need to.
Right. Okay.
Working with PG&E on several issues, and one of them is a response to the district's request for information on the substation cost of ownership. What was existing, what improvements were made to make to the maintenance determination. We have received a diagram from PG&E, but frankly, we need their technical teams to get together, our technical teams and theirs, to determine actually what was enhanced and what was there existing, what was enhanced, and see if we actually are responsible for the entire maintenance costs of the $2.9 million of improvements that were done to the substations, or if some of those costs were that they upgraded existing equipment that is still being used by the other entities, which is Tiger Creek and Salt Springs. So we've asked for a meeting through PG&E of the technical teams to resolve that issue. We've also asked for a meeting with PG&E to discuss the risks and benefits of the switch station project, and board members would be involved in that meeting as well. And that's all I have until we get into the switch station.
Any questions or comments on 8D? Answer.
So what is your reaction, Michael and board, regarding PG&E? You know, I feel like you're taking them to task, and I say hooray for that. Is this something that they are expecting, or are they just expecting you to just go, okay, and end of story, what's the big deal?
First, my feeling is they've generally been responsive, and it's just the process of figuring this out, and the rest of that is not particularly fast, but they're not dragging their heels. I mean, it's been reasonable so far. And in the meeting we had in Sacramento 3 years ago, maybe, I'm trying to remember now, they stated categorically that any maintenance that they were currently doing would not be our responsibility. So, for example, the 12K underbill they were doing before, they would continue to do it. They have a protection system between two pieces of their equipment that was there before we arrived, and it appears to us as if we're now being charged the maintenance on that because that equipment was upgraded. And I at one point told them, I said, we're giving you free upgrades, maybe we should be charging you. I mean, because they have a brand new 12K line that's now cheaper to maintain. They had depreciated costs for fixing it, and they got it fixed for free. So in that spirit, we want an explanation. And so they haven't finished their own meetings to decide that. But, you know, there's certainly been reasonable. They're a larger utility than us, so they seem to work a little bit slower, but not out of line.
Why'd you keep going?
So the revised system impact study has been received and comments submitted. The system impact study is a general feasibility study for the project. The study should be completed this month. Once complete, if the report is favorable, which it is, in fact it's in your packet, a facility study with an estimated cost of $125,000 could be initiated, which gives more specific information on the exact equipment to be used and probable costs of PG&E, not probable costs of the entire project, just their probable costs. So it's a huge differential. PG&E has mentioned the possibility of not completing the facility study and moving straight to an engineering study, which actually would save the district $125,000. Due to concerns of having to redo work because of design changes, the district feels it is important to complete a portion of the environmental work prior and the scoping with the Forest Service, getting an idea, because the scoping, the environmental work will go through the Forest Service. It's their land, so they'll be a lead agency on the environmental, whether it be a letter to the file on the EIR, EIS, a negative deck, or whatever it might be. All paths on environmental will lead through the Forest Service. So it's important to not only do the environmental scoping, but also some preliminary design work before we proceed with an engineering study with PG&E, so we know that PG&E is working on the right environmental aspects and also the right preliminary engineering. As I mentioned, environmental could be a letter to the file based on the existing EIR, EIS, a neg deck, or an impact study. We will continue to work with PG&E to determine these next steps. I just wanted to refamiliarize. This is the switch station schedule. It does have a completion date of October 26th of 2018, and it has been budgeted as has been shown in the past at the $2.7 million figure. This does not account for any savings that we might have for reusing equipment at KM Green, as previously mentioned. And with that, I open it up to any questions of the public.
Yeah, the only question I have on the systems impact studies on page 72 of our packet, which I guess is page 1 of the study. At the bottom, it says the intent of this project is to bring the existing interconnection up to the, and then there was a word standards that was crossed out. There's a word guidelines that was crossed out. Now there's a word requirements. Who made those edits? Why were the various words changed? What was the point of the changing of the words? The reason I ask is because I think it was a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, you provided us with excerpts from the transmission manual, PG&E's transmission manual. And the wording in there was less emphatic about it being requirements and more like a guideline. A nice to have, a should be, if possible, kind of a thing. I don't remember the exact words of it. So I think that this particular word is an important word in this document, and I'm just wondering who first had standards, who crossed it out, who put guidelines in, who crossed it out, how did it come up with the word requirements?
So I believe the time frame was that the original version said standard. I think I put in guidelines, and then Barry Shepard of PG&E put in requirements, referencing PG&E's interconnection handbook. So I think that's the process. The wording that you're referring to in the transmission interconnection is that the interconnection states generally using the word generally emphatically, that the point of demarcation will be between 100 and 200 feet of the point of ownership change. And usually, this interconnection change is, so those are the two big words that we're focusing on in our conversations, is the words.
Yeah, well, that to me is not a requirement, it's a guideline. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that's, so those are the two main words that we're focusing on in the transmission interconnection handbook that we're talking to PG&E about.
And generally, the point of control is within 100 feet of the point of demarcation, is that what you
Yes. So the point of demarcation and the point of ownership is generally within one span. I think you might remember those.
of the control system?
Right.
And we're currently not 100 feet, but a mile and a half. You may have answered this question before, but is there any improvement in safety by moving this switch station, or is there any improvement in system protection by moving this substation?
No, it's a responsibility of maintenance is the question. Right now, they would be impacted by any fault on the 115 line. Their system could be impacted by the same control system that we would be moving down the hill. So instead of this relying on us to maintain a shorter section of line, they're relying on us to maintain a longer section of line. So it's all about maintaining the 115 line.
Okay. Comments, questions from the audience?
And we'll be bringing this back as well.
8F is discussion and possible action related to the district's research and efforts to improve the efficiencies and minimize the losses of each department as measured in performance reporting. Welcome, Brandy Finch.
Thank you. Good morning.
Brandy Benson.
I'd like to start with electric. Our production for the month of May was 408,000 kilowatt hours with an actual metered of 313,000 kilowatt hours. This gives us a total system loss of 95,000 kilowatt hours, or 23.34%. I've broken that down, as you can see here on the slide. Distribution system losses were at 7.57%, and the out valley line loss shows 9.57%. You'll remember that our out valley line loss is a calculation. It's simply the leftover losses that aren't shown previously. I would like to point out that we have tried to reduce the losses for our step-up transformers here. At this moment, we have 3 of the 4 step-up transformers that allow the generators at the powerhouse to run energized. We had that down to 2 at one point, but when we had our last out valley outage, only 2 generators were available, and one of those failed, causing a longer power outage. So we have looked at that again and decided that we will keep 3 of the 4 step-up transformers energized to allow all 3 CATs to respond in an emergency situation. We are also taking a look at a circuit investigation project that we'll be doing here in the Valley later this summer. We're hoping that through this investigation we might find additional sources of losses through the Valley. We'll be going on each of the 3 circuits from transformer to transformer, tracing the line and looking at phasing. If we look at the next slide, I did a breakdown based on our kilowatt hour losses per feeder. Now, these are based on the feeders at the powerhouse versus our billing system billed kilowatt hours per feeder. And as you can see, for both April and May, our commercial circuit has the highest losses. So when we go out to do this phasing project in the valley on the circuits, we are considering starting with commercial simply because we have the highest potential for finding issues on that circuit. Are there any questions on electric line loss?
Why would residential go up in May?
I do not have a good answer for that.
It's not a very large number, though.
It's not, no, it's 6,500 kilowatt hours, but it does look like a dramatic increase on the chart. I'd also like to report to the board that we will have a harmonics line item on the next agenda. Exponential is working on their final report, and they have promised it to us by the end of June. Great. Moving on to...
Before you leave that
Mhm.
slide, what's the total for April? The kilowatt, that's the line loss, but what's the kilowatt hours? I mean, is the percentage ratio different?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, you have the absolute numbers there, but how does that compare to the amount of actual power delivered? I mean,
Gotcha. For April and May, our percentage for the whole distribution system was about the same, 7.52% versus 7.57%.
I don't think she has percentage loss by feeder, if that's what you're asking.
it's online, I just didn't have a chance to find it. Okay, I'll come back.
Moving on to propane, we had an actual metered cubic feet of 854,000 cubic feet for the month of May, for an unmetered total of 46,823, which is 5% of our total production in propane. For the fiscal year so far, this gives us a 3% loss.
We're back up to electricity for a second. So in April, the total billed lifts was 62,000 and commercial was 210,000. So it's perfectly reasonable that the line loss would be larger in commercial, but the ratios may be about the same. Because there's 3 times as much commercial sales, metered sales, kilowatt hours as there was, and those bars look about 10,000 versus 32. So I think the ratio is about the same.
Because of the increased usage, you just look.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect commercial. It wouldn't occur to me that commercial is more than lifts, but in April it was a lot more, just because there's so few lifts going.
I can update that chart to make it clearer.
Yeah. Okay.
Propane's better than electricity.
Propane's better than electricity. Any questions on propane before we move over to water wastewater?
23% is too high. I mean, where do you think the low-hanging fruit is on that?
We are focusing our efforts on in-valley consumption and
Distribution system losses?
Distribution.
That's probably where it is, given the history of the distribution system.
And trying to make a determination, we discussed it in the operations committee, trying to make a determination why the estimates that we received were so far off on the out valley line, from 3% to 10%, and what could be the reasons for that.
Do you think that's a real number, meaning it's a calculated number, it's an imputed number? Do you think it's a fair
leftover number?
Yeah, it's a leftover number.
Right.
Do you think it's a fair number?
Depends on our estimates for transformers. Transformers is the big estimates that we have that aren't real numbers. We're trying to define and get it down away from estimates. That's why we'll go out into Powerhouse is now online, and we can look at that usage.
But would it also be fair to have that chart just say out valley lines 3% and unknown 6%? Because right now we're just saying anything that we can't account for
Is
goes
out there.
there.
It's anything before the meters at the powerhouse.
Right.
So it's not distribution
It's
system.
not
So it's
distribution
anything before the powerhouse meters.
Right. And then, and some of the numbers we have there are actually measured and some are a model.
Mhm.
Right.
Can't you measure out valley loss?
We can measure everything from the Cal ISO meter to the 3 relay meters at the powerhouse. So that loss, that 10%, 9.57%, is anything in between those. But it includes quite a few transformers. It includes estimates for the usage of those transformers, which we're estimating on manufacturer's specs at this point.
Because there's no meters, intermediate meters in between that.
But there's a meter, Cal ISO,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there's a meter at the powerhouse.
Right.
So you can calculate the losses for the out valley.
Which include KM Green transformer, which is a huge transformer, KM Blue transformer, step-up transformer. It includes all these transformers we're estimating.
Right.
It's not all just line loss.
Right.
There's no other transformers involved. It's all just sectionalizing cabinets, vaults, and the actual loss of the line through the ground.
Okay, I'm sort of assuming out valley includes transformer losses.
Well, then it's
Then it's
very
accurate.
accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the 3% included.
I see.
You know, I don't, and that's one of the questions that came up in operations and capital is to go back and, you know.
Figure out what the 3% included?
Yes, sir.
And we would like to confer with PG&E what's typical
Sure.
on a long line like this, if they have any data that they could, so we could see if we're way out of the ballpark.
Yeah, they don't have anything at that voltage.
Or that
Yeah.
design.
This is a
So
non-standard
you-
voltage
yeah.
that they don't use, yeah.
Mm.
But you might find wind companies, because wind farms use this voltage. But there's somebody else who's done something similar. We just have to find them.
That's a very good point. Wind farms at the 34K.
Right.
PG&E would be good for the 115 because they have 115.
Yeah, absolutely.
Water.
Water. The production for May was 418,000 with an actual metered number of 282,000. This gives us a total system loss of 136,000 gallons for the month, which is a 33% loss for the month. That percentage is high in comparison to how much the actual loss is because of our low production for the month. We did have some additional identified system losses, the hydrant and sample flushing into the sewer system that we talked about earlier, and there was some fire department usage this month. So our total unidentified losses for the month were 27%. Taking this on a year-to-date basis, that gives us a unidentified loss for the year of 1,746,000 or 15%. We've talked about in the past installing water meters on the district facilities because the 12,000 gallons that we use for district facility use is an estimate. Our staff's looked into that and have confirmed that the CSB, this building, and the wastewater treatment plant are going to be fairly easy to install water meters. It will just be the cost of a water meter and staff time to do it. They're still looking into the shop to see where the best place to put that would be. To look a little further into the high percentage number that we are seeing as far as loss for the year, we've done a comparison over the last 5 years of unmetered water or losses in the water system. And as you can see, we had fairly high losses in 2010, and then 2011 was very high. It is lower in the past 3 years, and our current year-to-date of 1.7 million is pretty low on the spectrum of losses compared to historic losses.
But this chart starts at 2 million, not at 0?
Yes.
The 2 million is just the first tick mark, yes.
Wait, you're right.
So visually, it's,
Yes.
yeah, it's misleading. Yes, okay.
Yes.
I think one of the
I
major.
don't want to be too harsh, but.
Yeah. I think one of the major reasons that it's so much lower, 1.7 compared to 2 million in 14, 3.5 in 12. I mean, one of the biggest uses of unwatered meter is leaks.
Well, wasn't there a fire in 2011 that had to be put out?
Mountain.
If I remember right?
Yeah,
Does that use water?
yeah, it was an estimate as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fires, leaks that come are both good indications. We have, or I think we're very much more aware of the level of our tanks and the water that's going through our meters than we have been in the past.
Are there any questions on
Well,
water?
but the assumption in that number is somewhere there's a pipe that's leaking, or more than one.
Well, there's water leaks in every water system, and there's
Yeah.
lots of water leaks. And one of the areas that we're hoping to do this summer is actually do pressure tests in the residential areas to try to find if we can find those leaks, because it's almost impossible to find a leak underground because there is no, it just goes into the ground, and we have an older water supply. So if we can find a non-occupied area that we can actually pressurize up, we can see what the relative loss of the pressure is in that system and figure out if we have issues, and then try to narrow down the problem to specific areas.
And I would like to point out on water, our goal for the losses for the year is 15%, and we are pretty close to
17.
on track for that.
Wastewater is next.
Wastewater. In 2015, our influent metered, which is the water coming into the wastewater treatment plant, was 1.39 million gallons, with our actual metered out in the valley of 265,892. So our total unmetered water coming into the wastewater treatment plant is 1.124 million, or 81%. We had, similar to water, an additional hydrant flushing into the system. That's that dead-end flushing of 8,000 gallons. So our total identified system losses is at 2%, which leaves us 1.1 million gallons, or 79% of unidentified system losses. If we look at this on a year-to-date basis, that is 4.7 million gallons, or 35%. And similar to water, we wanted to look at that on a 5-year basis to kind of gauge how bad that is. And in comparison, you can see that wastewater in particular depends on the amount of snowfall we get for the year. Infiltration is directly comparable to how much water comes down the mountain and gets into our system. So if we look back, we have again, we're starting at a minimum here of 2 million gallons at the bottom, but our current year-to-date of 4.7 million is comparable to the last 3 or 4 years. We're on track for an approximate 5 million gallon infiltration season, which is the same as a loss for the wastewater treatment plant.
So last meeting, we had a discussion whether the dilution actually reduced our costs or increased it. So I'm wondering if we have any more data on that.
I don't know if we have data, we have management
Opinions?
opinion.
That'd be even better.
Yeah. So I think there is a certain amount, there's quite a bit amount of thinner wastewater helps the membranes. It helps them not plugging. We've always had infiltration, and of course with the age of our system we have quite a bit. So if we only measured 260-some thousand gallons of wastewater, we'd probably plug our membranes pretty quickly. So dilution is a factor. Whether it's 100% or more like 50%, you know, if you could cut that number in half and only have 2.5 million gallons, you probably still have a dilutable substance, but it does increase costs as far as electricity, as far as running pumps, running motors, getting the water through the pump, you know, age on the absorption beds, you know, where we're putting them through, you know, it has definite costs on there. But as far as the membranes go, they would much rather run, especially with the capacity that we have now, it helps the membranes out.
So my question is, a target of 30%, is that the optimal amount of dilution? Or
Definitely like to get that, bring that number down.
but I was saying, is the target of 30%? Isn't our target 30%?
It's 20%?
20%. And is that based on the right amount of intrusion that we like to see, or?
It's based on industry standards, and it's I don't think we know exactly what would be the
Industry
optimal.
standards for people that do tertiary treatment?
That is the South Tahoe PUD does tertiary treatment. And,
Okay.
you know, the people that we've checked with, yes.
Mhm. Okay.
Great.
That concludes my report on performance reporting.
I think the 5-year comparisons are very helpful. Any other questions or comments?
Just, we discussed it quite a bit at the operations committee meeting, and after that discussion, I guess I'm a little less alarmed by these percentages than I was before the discussion.
Why is
Because
that?
there are always going to be some losses in these systems. We know that. We're not going to bring them down to zero. So I take the electricity. If we were able to bring it down to a very reasonable percent of loss, I mean, it's a significant dollar amount, but it might be $30,000 of savings, maybe.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
with the
and then
electricity, yeah.
On the waterfront, the leaks aren't costing us that much. What it does is it reduces our, capacity to supply water by some amount. I did a quick calculation. I thought it was about, maybe 5 acre-feet, which would be nice to recover if we can, if there's a reasonable way to do that. On the wastewater treatment, we just had that conversation. It's not all bad. The infiltration's not all bad. So I'm just a little less alarmed. I mean, I would like to see the electricity come down to, I'd like to save that $30,000 if we could, but I don't think we'd spend $1 million to save the $30,000. That's my point.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, when those are kilowatts generated from diesel, the value of saving it was much,
Right, this is now 7.5
much
cents or
higher.
something like that.
Yeah, instead of 28.
Right.
Nancy?
So I appreciate all the effort that's going into this, so on and so forth. But at some point, do you think you're going to go, okay, we've done everything we can, this is the way it's going to be? I would assume that the answer to that is yes. And if that's the case, is that years away? Months away?
Well, I just, I think that when it comes to the water system, it's a matter of going through this pressure testing and then saying, well, is it reasonable to, dig up a road or, somehow replace line, or is it not reasonable? In the case of the wastewater treatment, I think there's some low-cost things that will be done this summer, right? Dealing with manhole covers and so on to see what that does. We know that there's some lines that should be repaired or replaced. It's just the question is when does it rise to a level of priority, functionally? Because like I said, as has been said, this infiltration is not all bad. It's just when the lines start to fail, that would be bad. And that's when they have to really be replaced. So, but I think it's a good, because that's basically the question that I had going into the operations committee meeting. We keep collecting this data, we keep seeing these percentages. What does it really mean financially, and what does it mean functionally? And I came away from the committee meeting saying, yes, there's some significance, and it would be nice to get these percentages down in in certain cases, but it's not as alarming as it seems. I just don't think it is as alarming as it seems.
But the other thing we're looking for are errors in the system that are causing loss of revenue, because, right?
Yeah,
Something's not being metered or something else.
That is-
We'd like to make sure we understand that
Yes.
completely.
Yeah, that's a different story. We want to be sure that we're metering accurately all uses.
So do we have a sense then? Is that years away?
No, that I think we're pretty close to having that one nailed, I think. Don't we, the metering?
I think it's an ongoing thing. I think the phasing and the circuitry project that Brandy's doing to see where each circuit goes is going to help in that effort. I think we're a lot better than we were, but one of the things I appreciate the board bringing this up is that it keeps us focused on, trying to be efficient and trying to limit losses. But overall, as far as the remote read project, we're light years where we used to be. So I would say that I think it'll be an ongoing project, but we're very close to being a lot better than we have been ever in the past.
Well, in the spirit of keeping you focused, would it make sense to have the top 3 or 5 action items per department listed? Meaning, what are the 3 things you think you could do to...
I think we do, actually.
Do you?
We do in the bottom. Not on these, but they're on the reports themselves.
Okay, right, action items, yeah.
Are listed. Yeah, Bob Indy asked for that, and yeah, they're listed on each of the reports.
So you have them, that's great.
And we can put them onto the slides as well, just to refresh the board.
If you can fit them,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Thank you for keeping staff focused.
No problem. So, like on electricity, do any of these things have merit? Meaning, are you far enough along to figure out if any of them have an impact? Like one step-up transformer off during May, I guess you concluded you can't really do that.
One step-up transformer we can do.
One you can, 2 you can't.
2 we can't, or at least we don't feel that it's prudent. The transformers are an estimate, however, so we would need a couple of more months of data to see if it's impacting the bottom line. From a single month, we haven't really been able to tell.
Well, at some point, maybe it doesn't have to be every month. I'd love to understand which of these are having impacts and which are kind of a waste of time.
And we'll update these to include, we don't have the circuitry and phasing project on this list right now, so we'll get that updated as well.
And I guess it's fair to say the Capital and Operations Committee considers this in more detail than...
Yeah, we discussed it just about every...
Good. Anything else on performance reporting? Thank you, Brandy. Are you off the hook? Looks like you're off
At
the
least for a
hook.
little while.
8G is discussion and possible action regarding the treatment and flow rate of well number 2 of the community water supply. Rick Hansen. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning.
So as the board is aware, we are required by the state to reduce our water use with irrigation by 25% to help conserve water. And along with the district's current stage 2 water alert, the district has closely been monitoring the way we pump and store our water. With this in mind, we've been pumping the wells differently, and as you can see on the form on page 91, and I lost my clicker here. This one? Find out. There we go. Not a great chart, but it's better on page 91, and it's also a form that we provided with the Operations Capital Committee. And it's just our weekly aquifer tracking level sheets. We are now pumping wells 4 and 5 a lot less, and actually using this well. By doing so, it allows the wells to recover, and it increases the aquifer level, and we brought the aquifer level up to 155.1 feet above the pump, which is a heck of a lot better than the 99-foot mark that we had back in last December. And so we're pumping wells 4 and 5 about 1/3 of the time, and focusing on the other wells, and primarily well 2, which is our shallowest well, or we call it a surface well. However, by changing our pumping policies or procedures, we've discovered, or there's an issue that's been brought back that we've had in the past. Basically, when we use well 2, the pH level tend to drop, and the consequence is, when that happens, the older buildings or places within the system that are where water's not moving around as much, you'll start to see a reaction where, for example, porcelain bowls for toilets and so forth will start to have a ring come up around the bowl. We just don't have the mixing in the valley like in December and January. There's a lot of people here, and there's water flowing throughout the system. Right now, May, June, and maybe not so much in July. The only way we can mix the system is if we actually do a deadline flushing, where we go to the end of each street, essentially open up a hydrant, and actually flush that water from the hydrant for a couple minutes back into a sewer system, which does 2 things. One, it moves water around the system a little bit better, but it also flushes that hydrant line, or that sewer line as well. But anyway, again, we were aware of well 2 having a pH issues, and back in 2006, we actually introduced soda ash into the system to bring up the level to more of a base level, a pH base level, which is around 7%, 7.1. And
A pH of 7?
The neutral 7, so that's where we want to keep
Okay,
it.
not a percentage of pH.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the difference in pH between a well 4 or 5 and a well 2 water?
Well, 4.5, we don't see as much of the problem, and it's between 7.0 to 7.3.
Uh-huh.
When we pump well 2 exclusively, it drops down to 6.3 to 6.5%.
Okay.
So in the past, we've used soda ash, actually powdered, dropped it into the chlorine contact, and it's been fine. Seeing that the levels were going to drop, we reached out to the Department of Drinking Water to tell them, hey, we're going to reintroduce something into the system to bring the level back up to neutral. We've also consulted with the district engineer, Matt Wheeler, and so we're going to introduce sodium hydroxide into the system at a low level to alleviate the problem. So Kim Hannigan with the Department of Drinking Waters responded back with our notice to introduce this, and she's approved it. There's no surprises here. We've had it approved before. So just this week, staff has reintroduced the pumping, the small pump that we use to introduce the sodium hydroxide, and it seems to be starting to bring the level back up. District Engineer Matt Wheeler and the Water Superintendent Derek Dornbrook will be working together closely, and we'll basically do just the bare minimum just to bring the level back up to a neutral at this time. But I thought it was, it felt that it was important to inform the board as well as the community that we are going to be doing this for a limited time until we see more mixing within the system.
So can you just explain the chemistry? So it's going to neutralize the acid. Are there any byproducts then left in the water from this sodium?
There shouldn't be. From what I understand from talking with Matt Wheeler and the water superintendent, Derek, of course, the problem is if you put too much of the chemical in it, you could get a metallic taste to the water. So again, we're just going to introduce just enough to bring us to that 7.1, 7.3 level, and that's it. And there shouldn't be any side effects. We have good, clean, safe drinking water, and
Right.
the community can see our latest consumer confidence report on the district's homepage. So we're not alarmed by this at all. It's just something that we think it's important just to help maintain the system.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions on this from the audience or the board? Moving on to 8H, discussion and possible approval of a bill of sale to convey the ownership of a used snowcat from Kirkwood Mountain Resort to Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. You're not off the hook, Rick.
No, sir. Last year, it's brought to the attention that Vail was trying to reduce their carbon footprint by eliminating some of their older snowcats that they use for grooming, and that there possibly could be some equipment that was available for donation to the district. Hearing this, the district sent Vail a letter, which is in the board's packet on page 98, basically asking the Vail for consideration of any used equipment, and Vail's come forward with offering the district a 1984 LMC 3400 snowcat, which is actually parked right there. Along with the donation of this snowcat, and there's pictures in the board packet, kind of shows you the condition, there's an extensive list of material that they'll provide for us, and some of the key elements on that list, besides miscellaneous belts and tires and hydro tanks, is a compactor bar. So if the board decides to accept the donation, we'll be able to clean up behind ourselves as we go out about the valley to do whatever operations that we might do and not impact the cross country or the operations of Vail Resort. Staff has thoroughly investigated this machine. We've sort of known that this machine's been on the radar for a while for donation, so we've had numerous trips to the vehicle maintenance shop. We have a board member who's very familiar with this machine and has seen it been operated for numerous of years, including by Dick Reuter, one of our former board members. So we're well aware of the machine. Staff also researched the availability of miscellaneous parts, pumps, motors, and so forth. And the consensus is it may not look very aesthetic or as nice as some of the other ones in the other lot there, but it's a workhorse. It'll do a great job for the district if we decide to accept the donation. And Michael, would you like to add about what some of the uses might be for the machine, as well as where we might park this machine and how we service it?
So, snow removal is not unfamiliar with the use of snowcats. Snowcats in big snow years can be used at many of the meadow condominium associations, base camp, sun meadows, edelweiss. Ramping is done most effectively with a snowcat. We currently do it with loaders, which is an unsafe practice, especially in softer snow. You can fall off the end of a ramp or even sink into it. Cornice Court, East Meadows, all have had ramping. KMA actually has had ramping years ago. So in big snow years, ramping the snow with snowcats and the use of the snowcat, moving snow away from buildings such as the meadows and sun meadows to get access to the back. Ramping around district properties, East Employee Housing, the CSB, wastewater treatment plant, and more importantly, access to utilities in the meadow and others. One of the areas that specifically could use a ramp or could use snowcat help is at the Sun Meadows 2 transformer, where in big years that melt-off creates a big danger zone where they actually have to use yellow tape, if you remember, to keep the snow cross-country skiers out of that area. Access to the wells, access to the well heads, access to the monitoring wells. Just because it snows doesn't mean we can't get to our facilities. We still have to get out there. Access to the lower lift, which can be a nightmare in a big snow year, it would be made much easier. Back in the day, we used to hire Dick Reuter to come out and ramp all of our snow removal contracts in the old D6, if you remember. So ramping and snow removal go hand in hand. Last 3 or 4 years, we wouldn't really need to use it, but in 2010 or 11, it would be those type of years, it's paramount. We have, if the board decided to accept this donation, which Vail has been working for a considerable amount of time to get this machine ready. I've actually driven it, so has more qualified people like Dave Waddle and Rick Ansel. If we decided to accept it, I think we would park it over by the black tank in between the vehicle maintenance shop and the wastewater treatment plant. And because of great planning the vehicle maintenance shop's doors are actually wide enough to accept a snowcat, so we could actually work on it interior.
That's great planning.
Yeah, so somebody should be given a little bit of credit for that great door plan, Mr. Dorman.
Absolutely.
So, with that,
Just a few hackles at the time. Some extra expense.
with that, it's staff's recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to accept the bill of sale from Vail Resorts for this machine. It has a estimated value of $14,000.
And you know the machine?
Yeah, and the committee concurs that it's worthwhile to accept. We should thank Bill for their effort.
I don't think you mentioned this, but the snow removal, the snow staff, the resort is sorry to see the machine go, so
Yeah.
that's the best recommendation of all.
Okay. Nancy, you had a question or comment?
So obviously Vail must know that, you know, maybe the question is Vail understands how we're going to use this piece of equipment, and I think I heard you say it might be going out into the meadow, and so they're aware of that, and there's no alarm on their part that it might be out there and disturb something out there like the cross-country trail.
And that's one of the big reasons that it has to have that compaction bar, so we don't make marks after where we go. And we'll be primarily using that trail that goes across in the middle of the meadow, which is meant for utility.
Okay, thank you.
So the bar covers your tracks.
And we would work with Vail with their operations. Obviously, we're not going to go out on a Saturday afternoon to go do something and impact anything there. So we have a good relationship with their field people, so we'll continue that. So.
Any other questions?
So, here, first off, is it, we're gonna pay $14,000 to acquire the cat, later?
It's a donation. We're not going to pay anything.
Okay, good. What do we estimate the annual maintenance to be?
I would think that depending on the snowfall and the use, it's probably going to be used under a 200 hours.
Right, you want to keep it under 200 hours per year.
So,
Because it's not carbon compliant.
so based on that, it would
And
be.
just
Go ahead, Bob.
yeah, go ahead. So how much per year maintenance costs?
Yeah, I would think a couple $1,000 possibly in parts and materials, and then staff time to
Right.
keep that up. It is going to take maintenance and
Sure.
repairs. It's older equipment just does.
Okay, and if it breaks and it's impractical to repair it, what does it cost to dispose of it?
I would think that we would try to sell it. We saw one online that was going for $14,000, though that was a running machine. I think our first option would be to try to sell it, and the second option would be to cut it up and dispose of it.
Any other questions or comments? You're looking for a motion for approval, I assume?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Dormer recommends that, moves that we accept the cap from Vail.
Rickard seconds.
So all in favor, Rickard?
Rickard, aye.
Andy?
Andy, aye.
O'Grady, aye.
Dormer back?
Epstein, aye.
So we're the proud owners of the new snowcat, or the old snowcat. We're proud new owners of the old snowcat.
A vintage machine.
A vintage machine, yes. 8I, presentation and possible action. Thank you, Rick.
Sure. Thanks, Rick.
Presentation and possible action regarding the performance of the Snow Removal Services Department, possible approval of credits for the 2015-16 season, and the establishment of a rate stabilization fund. Manager Sharp. And this has been considered by the Finance Committee, not the Operations and Capital Committee, I assume.
District staff has discussed in the past and presented information with regards to what the risks are, the variable risk in a big snow year as compared to a low snow year. And this slide here shows the projected totals of variable costs as compared to what those costs were in 2010-11, and indicating a difference in the amount, a total of $121,000 of potential risk for the district in the case that our costs outrun what our projects are. We do have a snow removal reserve fund that we have established where we charge our participating associations an amount, and it totals $283,000. And on this slide, it basically shows the age or the purchase date of our equipment, the estimated useful life, and the original cost of that equipment. And you can see that certain pieces of equipment have already been depreciated, and due to maintenance efforts, they are continuing, but our total $1 million in original cost of equipment, we have 283, so I think our reserve funds needs as much assistance as possible to keep that up. And at some point, we're going to have to start replacing tracklesses. Right now, I think we're in good shape for the next couple of years, but at some point, we're going to have to buy a new trackless, and that's going to cost $120,000 to $130,000.
Michael, can I just clarify that, first of all, the snow removal reserve fund is just a bookkeeping? I mean, there's no account, is there an actual?
There's an actual fund.
There's actual, okay, there's actual, okay.
We established that and the fire department fund as separate funds.
Okay, okay. And so is this reserve, has this been accumulated through charges for depreciation? That's how this is accumulated? Okay, thanks, that's what I wanted.
So this is actually a fund that we have, and if we needed to go out and buy two tracklesses, we could actually do so at this point. So this year we look at a net income from the associations of approximately $94,000, from driveways $9,800, and non-eligible associations, and those are associations that had multi-year contracts where we accepted those contracts from Alpine Smith, but as a condition of accepting them, we said that we would there would be no refund available. So, and that's a totaling of $4,000. District staff then thinks, for the reasons illustrated, for the risk factor of a high year and for the reserves, that it would be prudent to start what we're calling a snowy day fund, or a fund that could smooth out variances in snowfall amounts over year to year, and to be used in the case of a large year. And to fund that, we would propose of board authorizing contract credit for associations participating in the 2015-16 snow removal services program in the amount of 12.57% of the 2014-15 contract, which is exactly what the refund was of last year. Also, to establish a reserve fund from the excess snow removal revenues to boost the existing reserve fund and to create a stabilizing fund for future large snowfall winters. And that fund would be shown on the right-hand side. It would total $50,000. So these are percentages at this time, and Jill does remind me these are preliminary numbers, that the final books have not been closed. But at this point, we'd like authorization to refund 12.57% to the members that participate in next year's program, and to establish a snowy day fund in the amount of approximately $50,000.
I know I should know this, but sorry, I've forgotten what I know. So in the case that our actual costs exceed the contract amounts, do we currently have any way of, we don't currently have any way of recovering those amounts, right? So the only thing we do is if we come in below costs, we refund. If we come in above costs, somehow we absorb it, pay it through other means. And so this snowy day fund would be aimed at covering those overages should they happen. And then what, if it gets to a certain level, then we start refunding more? In
Yeah.
other words,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Sure, or you don't fund it and, you know, you refund, no, yeah,
Right.
sure. And what the adequate number on that is, I don't know. I mean, we had the loss, the potential loss in 2010-11 of $141,000. I don't know if that's the right fund or not.
And the Finance Committee reviewed this and agrees with the recommendation, because right now, if, we have a guaranteed price, and if it costs more than that, it comes out of property taxes, which is not really fair to the people who pay property taxes, because not everyone is getting snow removal. So the proper way to do this would be to either change the rates so we can charge extra when it happens, or establish a snowy day fund that would cover us in those things. And having a sort of a predictable rate seems like the right direction to go at this point. Although, that could be, I understand planning may look at that and make some changes.
And the 12.57% was chosen because that matches last year's refunds.
Yeah.
So the associations were budgeting or have budgeted, should have that covered.
We could verify that in this room, but I think that's what happened.
At least one association.
Yeah.
Others have actually budgeted less.
For less of a refund.
Yeah, I mean, Karen Higgins, all of her contracts, 10%, I think.
Nancy?
So I guess I always thought that if you ended up with a shortfall in one year, you made it up in the next year. In theory, I mean.
Well, we could do that, but the cash has to be paid right away. So you can either think of it as borrowing from the property taxes to be paid back later, but
What did we lose in 2010?
I don't know what the exact number, but we had the potential from this chart to lose $121,000. But we could actually look that up and see what.
and we didn't raise the rates by $121,000 the following year, or did
The
we?
rates were
did
raised
raise,
a little
okay.
bit, but then they were refunded the next year.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
We had another drought.
so we don't really recover.
So the
Loss.
target is to just have stable, predictable rates with refunds in low snow years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had one other question.
Sure.
So on the snowy day fund, and then the snow removal depreciation fund, those are going to be two separate funds, or do you see them being commingled? Is there something that says it can only be depreciation to depreciation?
It would be my recommendation to put them in the same bank account, track them separately, but there's costs to adding new accounts that have very little money in it. So I don't know that it would be.
Yeah, and it wouldn't earn as good of interest. But the idea is that depreciation accurately reflects the replacement cost. So you expect to spend that.
So I guess, really where my question's leading is, the board could choose to tap that fund, the depreciation fund, as well as the snowy day fund. There's nothing that says, there's no policy out there that says depreciation for snow removal is just for just for equipment,
Yeah.
tangibles.
We could change our minds.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is there restriction on
No
using?
restrictions I know
Okay. Okay.
So we could use the depreciation for operations.
of. Yeah, as long as it's snow removal
Right.
operations, you could use it however you want. If you wanted to borrow that from another department, you can actually do that as well, as long as you have a plan to repay that department for that borrow.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I'll move that we approve this.
Ms. Epstein, I'll second.
All in favor, Rickard?
Rickard, aye?
Andy?
NDI?
O'Grady, aye?
Jumper guy?
Epstein, aye?
8J is discussion and possible action related to the district's efforts related to the Caples Lake water rights application with the State Water Board and the Department of Public Health. Manager Sharp.
As the board is aware, the district has been studying the possibility of pursuing a water rights for Caples Lake. We have a existing set aside of 200 acres from the settlement with EID on project 184. During this process, right, I think you'll remember that the board actually approved the project description that was going to be brought around to the various entities for discussing the project of using the Vale snowmaking line to recapture that water here at Kirkwood for domestic water. But before we did that, we had an offer from Vale to reassign one of their 2 water rights for Caples Lake. They have 2, both in the amount of 250 acre-feet a year, and one of these rights they weren't using and wanted to know if the district would like to pursue it. That water right, once again, is 250 feet, was extended from 2005 to 2015, and now is nearing the end of that extension. So if the district wanted to react to that, we would have to file for another extension, or they will have to file for an extension. So we took this before our consultants, both legal, Dick Shanahan, and a consulting civil engineer, Nick Bonsignor, for their analysis of this. And they both came back and are recommending that the district not accept and thank Vale, but not pursue the reassignment of this water rights. And the reasons for that are quite a few. Any permit issued pursuant to a new permit, and I'm going to call new permit, is the set aside of 200 acre-feet, and the reassignment would be in Vale. So any permit issued under a new permit would have a 1927 priority, whereas permit under the Vale reassignment would have a 1995 priority. Under the general principle of first in time, first in right, for California appropriated water rights, an earlier priority affords seniority over other diverters. So a 1927 priority is much better than a 1995. In Steve Volker's research, the 1927 priority would have priority over every other right except 3 hydroelectric priorities, which are not consumptive at all. So the 1927 consumptive right on Caples would give us extremely good rights on that water. Secondly, the assignment would be subject to term 91, which would be subject to curtailment of divisions during drought conditions, such as this year. So we couldn't use it during certain periods because of drought. The 1927 priority does not have subject to term 91. So a new permit under our 200 acre-feet set aside would not be subject to term 91. Additionally, the diversion periods of time are limited under the assignment to November through March by direct diversion and November through June during collection to storage. A new permit under the would have a year-round availability of water. And then finally, since this has been if the district was to succeed in a petition to the state board, we'd have to react pretty quickly. Since this has already been delayed, an extension and an extension, we'd not only have to file an extension fairly quickly, but we'd have to prove to the state that we were serious about actually perfecting that, and that we would go ahead and do our environmental and do this. So there's many steps to perfecting that right. If we wanted to take the reassignment, we'd have to petition the state for an extension. We'd have to do the environmental review. We'd have to have the state approve those documents, go out for public comment. We'd have to satisfy any protests, and then start up the project, and actually start up the project when the district might not be ready to do it. On the other hand, if we went for a new permit under the 1927, we could take our time. It follows a similar pattern. The cost would be slightly more, but it would be on the district's time frame rather than having these file extensions and do a hurry up. For these reasons, both of the consultants and staff recommend that we pass on Vail's generous offer for this assignment and recommends the board pass a motion directing staff to inform Vail of this.
And planning
The
committee?
planning committee completely agrees with that recommendation.
Questions, comments?
Yes, we do concur with this finding, and the cost, Michael, you said the cost difference was not significant. I think it's roughly in the range of $3,000 if we pursuing a brand new right of our own and accepting transfer of Vail's rights. So that's kind of putting numbers to your statement.
Thank you.
Questions, comments from the audience? Well, I'll make a motion that we thank Vail for their generous offer, but decline it.
Rickard seconds that motion.
All in favor? Rickard?
Rickard, aye.
Andy?
Andy, aye.
O'Grady, aye.
Deborah guy?
Epstein, aye.
So it passes. 8K is discussion and possible action regarding Kirkwood Capital Partners' proposed parking lot adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant in the meadow. This is an update, I guess.
At the last board meeting, staff was directed to work with Director Epstein on a letter to Kirkwood customers asking for their support of the district's concerns and questions related to KCP's proposed parking lot to be located on the existing school site. 281 homeowners joined the district in those concerns, and many additional comments were received, and those are contained in the packet. Additionally, several letters have been sent directly to TriTac, and those are also posted on the El Dorado County TriTac page to see not only the additional comments, but all of the district's input as well. TriTac has again canceled, and now it has proposed a meeting for July 10th. They can't have a meeting on July 3rd because that's a county holiday. So it's, the new proposed date is July 10th. So this is just a quick update on that ongoing subject.
And your picture, is that just where it is, or is there something
That's-
else you want to communicate?
That's just it'll follow through into the next subject, actually.
Right. Any discussion? Comments?
I took offense at the short blurb. Thank you.
I'll take further offense.
I took offense at the starting paragraph of one particular email when it was stated that the parking lot actually, I don't remember the exact wording, but the wording said that the parking lot was on Loop Road. The parking lot is not going to be, if it's ever there, on Loop Road. It is access to the parking lot from Loop Road. And I thought that was very misleading. I commented to Michael about it. I informed my homeowners association that the parking lot was not going to be sitting in the middle of Loop Road, as you would evidence by that email. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you for your comment. We received it. And I guess our discussion was that we didn't see a meaningful difference. So reasonable people can have different views.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I saw that too, and I was just so, what do you believe the consequence of that was, or could have been?
I think people would be very much against having a parking lot on Loop Road, which is a road they use to deliver their garbage. I get a visualization here of driving through a parking lot to dump my garbage. This parking lot would not be on Loop Road. It's simply an access road to get to the parking lot, just as it is an access road to get to the Chair 7 parking lot.
Well, that's true and not true. There's actually 10 of the 193 parking lots that are actually on Loop Road accessible, just pull into the park right along the, you know where the trailers have been removed? Those are parking spots that actually you would have to drive through to get to the trash. So the rest of the parking lot is accessible off of Loop Road. So I see your point there.
I'll just, I mean, I realize we disagree on this. The actual sense says this new parking lot would sit on Loop Road in the wooded area between Renwick Housing, the district's wastewater treatment plant, and the meadow, and accommodate 193 cars. So the question in my mind is if we reworded it to say this new parking lot would be entered on Loop Road in the wooded area between that, did I think anyone would change their position on, all we were asking people, not whether they're for or against the project, but would they support our desire to get answers clarified? And you know, several of us discussed it. I didn't think it would change people's position on supporting us, whether that wording was one way or the other. But I realized that we disagree on that. So, and I think the entire goal of doing something like this was to get the community engaged on it into that respect. You know, it was successful and it created dialogue.
Nancy?
So, has the district received any information, or has any information been shared with the board, whether Nate will still be leading this charge, or in light of the new head of KCP, is there going to be any kind of additional partner in this?
The district hasn't received any information, but George Stahl is in the audience. Maybe he can have
What did you just say?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No comment.
Why would you point to him?
Well, he works for the same people.
Oh, okay.
That's fair. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, George.
No problem.
Anything else on the proposed parking lot? Move on to 8L, discussion and possible action regarding a plan to meet the cleanup and beautification needs in the Kirkwood Valley. Michael?
So this picture does have multiple uses. Not only does it show a portion of the proposed parking lot, but it shows some of the equipment that's stored on there from Mountain Utilities. And staff was directed to work with KCP on the equipment stored, which we did. We reached out to Nate. First we did some investigation and looked at the asset purchase agreement and the bill of sale to ensure that none of the equipment that's shown there was listed on the APA as being purchased by the district. And we actually went out and confirmed that none of the items out there were listed on the bill of sale, and that this property is in fact property of the Mountain Utilities, or the current owner. So we reached out to Nate and let him know that we had done this exercise, and further reminded Nate that we had done a concentrated effort to remove all of District Mountain Utilities items that we did purchase, because there were things on this lot that we did purchase and we took away. But the things that we didn't purchase, we didn't take. We just took what was ours, and we made a concentrated effort to make sure that everything was removed off the site at the time of the sale. The only thing that was remaining was that Frankenstein transformer that was set up at the old powerhouse, if you remember, with the antennas that we took off a little bit later, when it's sitting over in our propane storage area right now. In a community effort, the district reached out to Nate and actually offered our assistance if they wanted to actually clean up the lot, because it was noted that we have the material, the access, and the relationships, and if you wanted to discuss that with staff, we could also always bring something before the board for their consideration. To this point, we haven't heard any response from that, but we did take some of the community's input and put it out towards Nate. On the beautification effort, I think Dale's done a good job on organizing a annual cleanup. The district participated last Friday, and we went throughout the meadow picking up trash for an area, and then had a picnic afterwards. I think it was a good course, and actually one of our employees earned $100 for finding the most unique item of trash in the meadows, which was Amy Pfeiffer here with Casey and Rick. So with that, I think it's a good effort to be on the positive side of beautification in the meadow, and I open it up for discussion.
Any discussion, comments?
Michael, is there any leverage that we can apply either as KMPUD or as a community on ARD to do the cleanup now that we've been clear on, the fact that it's their responsibility and that we're willing to provide them services if they wish to have services rendered?
We did check the equipment. I think it was your suggestion, or was a suggestion, to see if we saw any contamination that could have been visible through the storage of transformers. We didn't see any, but of course we're not experts in that field either. So contaminating the groundwater supply would be truly a leverage point, Bob, but we would have to do a more extensive review of the storage material and possibly have somebody that has more expertise in that field. That's one avenue, just for discussion.
Is there anything in the specific plan that requires, that would require KCP to maintain certain, I know that it's, for example, I know there's a requirement for, I think, sweeping roads twice a year, as an example. Is there anything else in the specific plan that would place a requirement of some kind? In all the mitigations, the EIR mitigations and so on?
Yeah, hazmat is a requirement, and if the district has any, issues, we have to go out and take samples of streams and things like that to make sure that there isn't a degradation of the groundwater supply. So once again, that's a possible. If a contractor, the district has regulations that if there's a construction site, they have to have dumpsters and remove their trash so that it doesn't blow around the valley.
I'm just wondering if there's something that has more to do with simply the aesthetics of the, within the whole list of county mitigations.
We'll take a look at it. I'm not aware off the top of my head.
Well, that presupposes that now that we've clarified the ownership, there is no willingness to clean it up, and we don't know that yet, right?
Yeah, we have not had a response.
I believe we all heard Nate say at the last meeting that he sold Mountain Utilities, and therefore none of that stuff belonged to him. He said that loudly at a meeting there. So I don't think
So
we're
he
going to
also
be
said
getting...
he didn't have the wherewithal to clean up any large scale leftovers. That was part of the same polemic there.
But we've now clarified that we didn't buy these particular items, which is something you may not have realized at the last meeting. It seems like the next logical step is a conversation to see where we stand.
Did you write him a letter?
I did.
Yeah,
Email.
it's in that.
Right. Nancy?
So just a follow-up, Eric, to your question regarding the specific plan. I don't know what is in the specific plan, but I have asked the county, if nothing happens, what can happen? And then basically it can be declared a nuisance by the county. And that would be the I guess you'd call it the heavy rod. And I think it's just part of it is how patient are we going to be regarding that? We all have different levels.
Would it make sense for you to contact the Amador County and see if they have any avenues to compel KCP to clean this up?
Yeah, and I'll definitely follow up on Nancy's comment there and find out what the process is. There's probably some sort of a process that you make an application or you make a petition or whatever it might be. And we'll bring that process back before the board for their consideration. And then we'll look at other areas that we can help to try to beautify the community. This is not a new subject for the board. I think Peter will remember, and possibly Eric, that we actually landscape that corner, part of our beautification process. And, we still maintain that corner So this is not a new subject for the district.
How about the corner opposite the corner we maintain, which has a combination of trees and volcano equipment and Vale equipment? Is there any, do you have any thoughts on how to get that cleaned up? Pretty much every visitor to the valley drives by it.
We've discussed that area with Vale. That's a Vale storage area, and I know they've recently done some work down in the lower shop trying to make it look a little bit better. They've removed a couple of trailers, I believe.
Yeah, they removed two trailers just below Renwick there in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, it's better than, I mean, it's been there for 15 years, most of that stuff. So it's not like it's something new.
You mean on the lower shop, or you mean that?
No, I'm talking about the school side.
Right.
Not the parcel you're talking about. That's changed. That's an increase over the last few years.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about the letters, Michael, that you wrote to TriTac about the concerns that, first off, KMPUD has about the parking proposal, and secondly, concerns that the community at large has about the parking proposal. Part of your approach there was to say, gee, you know, what are your plans for keeping people safe if they are coming from the parking lot and going to the ski area, given that there's a lot of other stuff peripheral to that proposed parking lot, the propane tanks, whatever. Might it be logical to just extend that verbiage and say, well, you know, what about the possible safety issues of people coming from the parking lot, given that it's adjacent to the remainder of the school site, which has a lot of junk equipment on it, and what's the plan to deal with the junk equipment? Doesn't seem like a very long reach logically from what we've already said to what we might say about that situation.
I think it would be, once again, probably a county issue, not so much a TriTac issue. They're more in planning and development. Yeah, but that's safety and hazmat issues on that, and public nuisance. We'll follow up with the county. I think the county is the appropriate source, just to find out what a procedure is and give
Sure.
KCP adequate time to respond to our communication.
Do you see any leverage on the other parcel, across from the one we maintain?
Just working together with Vale as we have been.
Okay, and it's Vales, not Volcano?
That's all Vale, yeah. There's some really old wood over there. The first stack is really old wood, and then there's some lift parts, it looks like, and then there's some newer wood that they were chipping and bucking on a pretty normal basis. I don't know if they're going to start that up again or not, but that's newer storage of wood.
Okay.
Stanley,
Yes.
if I may. Two questions. So as you're standing at the dumpsters, and right there to the left, a parent stream bed, is that on the school site? Is that part of the school site also?
Yeah, the district property ends at the dumpsters.
Okay,
Yeah, and we have a storage shed there.
right,
It goes right along that side of the stream, and then the rest of it is the school side.
okay,
And the county line is actually at the dumpsters, and it goes through the meadow in that fashion.
okay.
So the dumpsters are actually in Alpine County.
Okay.
And
And then a second question, sort of related but unrelated. What about Loop Road? Who owns Loop Road?
And that is owned by Vale, and we have a maintenance agreement with Vale that they will maintain Loop Road, and we will maintain the Powerhouse Road. And so the Powerhouse Road, which is also a loop, we have plans on some repaving on the lower section of that, which I'll address here later in my comments.
Any other comments on 8I cleanup? 9, general manager's report.
Today I will be talking about the Caples Lake stream flow variant. I think the action here is that we are a go for fish. We are going to have a boating season, and we are going to have some fish. Based on the due to the wet spring and the stream flow variance approvals that the board helped support at 2 meetings ago, based on the 90% forecast, EID has determined that it will not be necessary to continue variance flow, and that we will continue to have, right now the lake is full, and it is forecast to remain above the 13,000 acre feet level throughout the summer and into November. So it's real positive news for Caples. We will have a boating season, and we will be a fish season. District staff has made arrangements to continue our fish stocking program. This year, we're going to be looking at a total of, we have 2 different programs. The KMPUD Fish Enhancement Fund will be stocking approximately 4,500 pounds of catchable trophy fish, catchable and trophy fish, into Caples, and 55% going into Caples and 45% going into Silver. Tentative stocking dates will be right prior to 4th of July and prior to the Labor Day. 2015 is the 11th year of the program. We have $35,000 remaining in the fund. We spend about somewhere around $15,000 a year. So we have a couple years left of this program. The second one is an EID fund. It is approximately 1,600 pounds of 100% trophy fish. This is the 6th year of that program. We have about $24,000 left in that fund, and 2015 expense will be about $6,300. I do plan to be on site during these fish stockings, and we'll give you a first-hand report. Water stage alert is in effect. We had one request for exemption, which we have approved. It was an exemption for the putting in some wildflowers over by the Mountain Club deck. In your packet, you'll see our, possibly not in your packet, but we did respond to Brian Bigley with Vail with the conditions of that approval, and that has been approved. We have also notified the restaurants in the valleys and the hotels in the valley of the restrictions that are outlined in the Stage 2 report. And finally, we did put in an article in the newsletter letting our customers know that we have the ability to track water usage, and I think we put it in a very nice fashion. That was a request coming out of the Operations Committee. Timber Creek Townhomes, the board will remember that they approved the Resolution 1505, which approved the bill of sale and the notice of completion for Timber Creek Townhomes based on the general manager's approval. The testing and installation of the transformer is complete. We have accepted that. We're just waiting for a little bit of the administrative work to do to issue that final bill of sale. I don't think there's been any activity up there. There's no occupancy of any sort at this point. Appreciate George coming out to our meeting. There has been a change at KCP. We have received a letter that's in your packet on page 182 informing us that that a John, I think it's Reeder? Ryder, thank you, has been elected as the managing director of Kirkwood Durango Real Estate, and that Peter Force will be stepping down as CEO. And that Nate Whaley, the president of Kirkwood Resort Development and managing broker for Kirkwood Mountain Resort, will continue at Kirkwood and work in partnership with to advance the Kirkwood master plan. So we have a change in regard to KCP. We have not met this gentleman yet, but I anticipate that he'll be coming out.
So Mike, I have one question about the water alert management. How is compliance been going? And
Very well, actually. We've had one customer that was not abiding, we contacted them, and
Uh-huh.
it's been resolved.
Okay. I see more on the list, so I was curious. Nothing material, but
Yeah, there's a couple, you know, if it's 1 cubic foot, we haven't,
you give them a pass, but 12 or 19, you give them a call.
yeah, I won't say.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna put them out there, but.
Yeah, okay.
There's just one.
Yeah, I gave customer service some guidelines
Yeah.
on how much or how little to react to.
Well, I wasn't sure, I was thinking of filling my hot tub, but if I use irrigation water, it's cheaper, but I'm out of compliance.
Depends on when you fill
Yeah,
it.
you could do it between 8 and 8
Yeah.
p.m. and 10 a.m.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yes.
So I have a question on water alert system also. So when, and I'm just thinking of KMA in particular, so when homeowners go through a remodel process or they decide they're going to build a new home, their plans have to come to the PUD for, their sign off for all the utilities, and I guess even for snow removal to a certain extent. So I'm wondering, with this water alert system, is there something else that should be added to the checkoff? That says, okay, you're going to be okay. You must be looking at the plans and saying, you've got landscaping here, or you don't have landscaping here. I don't know. I'm just wondering how to educate.
So, I think there's two things there. I think that's a good point. Whether the district could allow the use of spray heads rather than drip irrigation, only apply to drip irrigation. I was just quickly looking at the stage 2, and water for new construction purposes limited to construction trades only, so they can't water, they can't indiscriminately water with district approval. And then applications for new service connections shall be granted only on the condition that the water shall be used for interior purposes and not for lawn or gardening watering or any other irrigation use for the duration of the drought emergency. So they can't really landscape the areas until after the drought emergency, according to this stage 2. But what type of landscaping is allowed after that point, I don't think is addressed in here, Nancy. Whether we mandate drip irrigation or an efficient, and I know that that's a big issue down in El Dorado County and other areas.
So if somebody were to come along, for instance, I think about Vail years ago, and I don't know whether they're going to do it or not do it this year, but out there in front of the lodge, they put that kind of water thing in it. Would that be something that the district would be questioning? That just doesn't seem like an appropriate use of water based upon the water alert system. Or does the district have no ability to call into question something like that?
If it's existing
Yes.
and they do it within the times that are allowed, they can use spray irrigation, one of
That
those.
thing, the one, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Under the existing. If we go to a stage 3, then there's no irrigation.
Thank you.
I could continue if
Yeah,
you'd like.
Timber Creek Townhomes.
Yeah, I think
You
I've
did that
done.
one, okay.
Yeah, did that
KCP
one.
changes, okay.
KCP changes, and then finally on the consumer confidence report that has been produced, it is on the website, and we put a item on in the newsletter. Continuing on, there you can see our fish. This was one of the items we did purchase from Mountain Utilities, and that is a retaining wall that sits over in Juniper Ridge, and I think we looked at that during our in-valley inspection. So that was one of our projects that we felt that was a eyesore for the district. So district staff went and removed the wall and dug out a foundation. We actually formed it up, used rebar, crazy, to support it, poured it in place, and came up with a wall to support that transformer, and then reformed the land around it and used jute netting to secure the bank, and then actually have a completed project. So we're We're very proud of that project. We did it right next to Bob Epstein's house.
It looks great.
He would also be proud of the project.
Yeah, I walked by this one.
This is what we like to see as the final product, and I compliment operations and Rick Ansel and your staff for a fine job on upgrading a portion of the district's infrastructure.
Did you remove the transformer while you were doing it? Yeah, I did.
And we had a
Because it
power
was
outage to
unstable.
the duplexes had a
Yeah.
power outage. So we modeled it after yours, right next to you, so we wanted to make something more substantial.
Yeah, right.
For those that
So,
don't,
Michael, Bob here. I
Yes, sir.
pointed out after our tour that there were similar issues on the Palisades Loop Road. What's the plan for those situations? Because it seems like they've got, I wouldn't say 100%, but pretty close to 100% of their utilities, lockers, and so on there in jeopardy. And this is after a very short period of time post-installation.
so the district had responsibility for one area where we actually had couldn't find an electrical line and had to dig it up, and we have repaired that over at Palisades. But they're having some erosion problems over there with the balance of those retention walls, and I've talked to their president and let him know that that's a association issue which they'll be addressing. And those are mostly water meter pits.
Great, so that's general manager's report?
Just a couple,
Okay.
for those of you that might not have known, there was a fire at Places. District staff, Sean Trevette at Benson, and a new volunteer, Spencer, responded with a 500-gallon engine. They, of course, concentrated on the saving the trees and the propane tank, which I hear was steaming profusely. They did an excellent job in, saving the forest, of course. And right as soon as they ran out of water, Amador County showed up with a 2,000-gallon water truck, so we were able to continue pumping after that point. But a pretty dramatic picture, and we met with Lynn Morgan yesterday and shared this picture with her, and I don't think she was aware of it, actually. So
When was the fire? Okay.
Saturday, a week ago.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
So,
Do you know the cause?
They don't believe it's foul play or arson or anything like that. It was just some renters were unfamiliar with some of the equipment inside the home, and as a result, had them placed down.
So this is a home, not the barn. It's
one of the cabins, yeah.
a cabin.
Supposedly somebody with a burner. It's a skull, but it's a
One item that we'll be we're going to be facing the district is that we do have some asphalt repairs that we need to do. We need to get on these sooner rather than later so that they won't get worse. We have some in front of the CSB. As you walk in or walk around, you'll see some of the potholes that we'll have. We're looking at just doing the areas that are damaged, but we will have some asphalt issues, not only here in front of the CSB, but you can see this area as well. This is looking down at the rec center, but this is the portion of Loop Road that was not paved during the original construction. We did assume ownership of this, or maintenance responsibility for this road, so we'll be looking at doing repairs on that. And there you can see another pothole, which is right outside the district here. So we will have an expense on asphalt repairs to maintain our infrastructure. So I just wanted to bring that up. We'll have a better estimate of those costs to you at the next meeting. And with that, that ends my management report.
Any further questions of Michael? Committee reports, Kirkwood Summer Festival.
I'm just going to give a brief update to the board. The last Kirkwood Summer Festival Committee meeting was held on June 5th, and thank you to all the committee members that attended. there's a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes to make our event this year a successful one, and ultimately be able to allow us to purchase a gurney, a power-operated gurney, so to assist the fire department with their activities. So far, as the end of May, beginning of June, I updated the committee with some of the numbers, and we look like we're pretty much on track with our donations, like we were last year. Of course, we appreciate the $10,000 Echo Promise donation from Vail Resorts, but we're almost at $8,000 in donations, and some significant ones too. From example, the Cobb Family Foundation did another large donation, which we really appreciate. Cheryl Stern's been spearheading the winery and brewery vendor list, and so far we have 8 wineries and 5 breweries signed up. And pretty much everything is on track for our event. We're looking forward to it, so we hope to see everybody there on July 4th between 3 and 6. Unless there's any questions?
Yeah, when do we get our assignments?
I thought those were requests for service.
When do we get volunteered for certain activities?
Actually, Nancy Trevette and I are working on the volunteer list, and so we'll contact you just prior to the event.
I enjoyed the pie table last year. It was better than the fruit table.
Well, this year we're going to do both pie and cakes,
That's even better.
and we're going to eliminate the brisket sandwich or whatever that was. I'm going to bring back tri-tip, so I won't put you down for pies and cakes.
I don't know, I think he jumped it.
As long as Marcy can help, like she did last time.
She will.
All right.
Yeah, it's called front running. Did you have a comment from the internet or a question?
No.
Okay. So planning committee update, you're going to give that, Eric, I guess?
Yes. I
Thank
think
you, Rick.
everything's been covered except for one item. We did ask Michael to make a recommendation to the committee as to whether or not there's any real benefit to pursuing the idea of a multi-year snow removal contracts. And that was an idea several years ago. That eventually evolved to the enterprise service idea, which we've now put to bed. So the question is, are there any advantages in terms of efficiencies, administrative costs, et cetera, to pursuing the original idea of a multi-year contracts for the HOAs, or are we just fine the way we are? We don't want to pursue it just for the sake of pursuing it. So we've just asked Michael to come back to the committee with a recommendation as to whether or not to look into that.
Okay. Finance?
I just had one comment on the planning before I do finance. If nothing else, having a simpler paper process to just renew a contract where the only change is a price, that would be a lot less paperwork for Kathy to try to do things. And so you might consider that, because that could be quick. That could be incorporated into this year's and then simplified next year, or you consider other options. On finance, we've covered everything except I think a part of what we're going to look at is both how information is distributed, to try to simplify that and allow people to sign up on the web instead of by phone. So we have a discussion underway to simplify the distribution process. And then also annotate the financials, as well as you saw the first pass, some changes to how reporting is done, so it's more readily understandable. And then I'll go right ahead to snow removal ad hoc. I do recommend that we declare the committee
Dissolved.
completed. So I don't know if that takes a motion or not.
Operations, capital projects.
One item that we haven't talked about is that the committee has directed staff to apply to the state for permission to use reclaimed water, possibly to sell to the contractor that's doing repaving Highway 88. That could generate some income for us if we could get permission. And also to potentially make snow over at Timber Creek. So those are, which could be a win-win for the resort and also for the district generating income. Because Vail would like to run a fan gun over there this year, so they could guarantee opening Timber Creek in a low snow week. So,
Okay.
anything else, Sarah?
No.
If you need any help with the state water board, I have people I know.
It seems like it's the politically correct thing to do now, and this is. it's a
Now is
really
the
good
time to really, and
opportunity.
consider the
So-
fact that our reclaimed water is treated as much as it has.
Exactly.
If it can't be done here, I mean.
So anything you could do to expedite that would be great.
Okay, why don't you just let me know your contact, you know.
Yeah, it's Ann Olson, but I'll email
Yeah,
her.
let me know, and let me see, I can go top down.
And personnel, we have not had a meeting since our last meeting, but we will have one in early July, I think. Item 11 is general discussion opportunity for the board members to ask questions, for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, or request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda. Anybody have anything? Michael?
I think Standish knows this, and several of the board members know this, but staff will be approaching each of the committee members recommending that we not have July committee meetings. That would be for planning, finance, and operations. So we'll be talking to each of the chairmen to see if they would agree. Since the short term, 3 weeks till the next board meeting, staff feels that it would be appropriate, and we've already discussed it actually in planning as well. So I'll be approaching the chairman on that issue, but that would not apply to personnel where we have not had a meeting.
Okay, and personnel, it's going to be employee evaluations.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And any other, Social Security will also have an update.
Right. And how about the timing for reviewing the general manager's objectives? I forget when that is.
What I was going to do with that, and I mentioned it to Bob before the meeting, is I was going to put out a communication to all committee members with the suggested GMOs for the 15-16 year, asking for their input, and then bringing those before personnel at the next committee meeting at 8 o'clock on Friday, the 3rd, I believe, and then bringing those before the board on the 5th.
Okay.
So still getting those before the beginning of the fiscal year, but just not having a committee meeting do that subject.
Okay, so that's GMOs for next year.
Right.
And you're going to go through the committee chairman or email everybody on each committee?
I was going to go through the entire committee list and look for it, unless the board would deem otherwise. But that's what we've done in the past, is taken out to the entire committee and seen if there was any comments, additions, deletions, or whatever else on GMOs for next year.
Okay.
And do that fairly quickly so that the committee members have time to get it back, to, formulate it in order to get that before personnel on the 3rd and to the board on the 5th.
Great. So GMOs for next year will be an agenda item for the July 4th meeting.
Yeah, we received some of the GMOs at yesterday's meeting, so thank you for that as well.
Right. Well, one. Yeah. Any other business? We'll adjourn before 11. So meeting's adjourned. And that's